On behalf of Riverbed Technology and Carahsoft, we would like to welcome you to today's podcast, focused around the success of fiscal year spend and end-user experiences, where Marlin McFate, Public Sector CTO at Riverbed, and Donald Kyzar, former CIO of the Department of Justice's Office of Inspector General, will discuss how federal agencies can make meaningful IT investments in digital experience monitoring and end-user experience monitoring to further their mission success.
As mentioned, my name is Marlin McFate. I am the Chief Technology Officer here at Riverbed Technology's Public Sector Group. We have a great topic today. We're going to keep it conversational today. And without further ado, let me introduce him. Donald, go ahead, introduce yourself.
Sure. I am Donald Kyzar, and I am a recently retired federal employee. I spent 26 years with the Department of Justice. 23 of those years was with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And throughout that time, I worked in a number of different information technology positions throughout the FBI. And then my final position was as the CIO for the Department of Justice Office of the Inspector General. For anyone that's kind of watched the news over the past couple of years, you've probably seen Michael Horowitz speaking at a couple of events up on the Hill as it relates to DOJ activities. The thing that comes to mind with all these positions that I've held was maintaining operational focus, the need for us to really have a true operational focus if we were an IT organization. And that's a difficult challenge for us in today's world, where the speed of the mission is putting enormous pressure on the information technology teams. And so for me, that is something that I've seen over time and in different positions, and am happy to talk to you guys about today.
Well, thank you so much for coming. Let's actually get started. I think that that was a really good segue maybe into one of the very first interesting questions. As you said, you retired here recently from Department of Justice. What are some of the biggest pain points? You mentioned operationally. What are some of the biggest points that you've had to consistently overcome within that role? Sure.
Well, what comes to mind right away, of course, is the technology challenges that we often encounter for various IT groups. But really, I think that the chief challenge is user expectations. The user expectations is what's driving us to do things like cloud migration. That really started as an initiative to drive economies of scale inside of the federal government with its purchasing of data center hardware equipment. But really, it transformed into something much more important, and that was operational agility, the ability for the government to keep pace with organizational demands and citizen demands at the same time. And so I think that is the essence of what our challenge is trying to figure out how to satisfy those user expectations in today's world, where I'm in the office one day, I'm at home the next, I'm on the road the rest of the week. And my expectations as a user for my IT team is that environment should be the same for me, regardless of where I'm located at. As long as I have connectivity, my expectations are my services are going to be the same. And that's a difficult challenge for us to meet in today's world while maintaining security inside of the environment. And so for me, I think that it is around managing that user expectation and really understanding what our customers need from us and then focusing on it. Those are key elements to this. Other things that have come along recently is moving to zero trust. The ability to move to zero trust, everybody's talking about, will it improve security? Well, there's a hidden message in this that I want you to get, and that is you're going to see improvement in the user experience when people are using Zero Trust, because the throughput on it is better than you're going to get through a VPN connection through Cisco Connect or something like that. Not that I'm an anti-Cisco guy, but it's a reality that we've seen it through testing, is that we're seeing performance improvements that we didn't expect. And so that's the nice benefit that we're seeing with that. And I think that those are kind of the main points, Marlin.
Yeah, I would imagine actually being the Department of Justice, taking a look at a lot of our different customers, and it ranges, right? There's certain federal customers of mine that moving to the work from home environment was a complete change, a 100% or 180-degree turn for them. I can imagine, though, the Department of Justice, you had some experience with that, with people having to be in the field. Probably one of the larger groups of mobile workforce, if you will, within the federal government. And so with that, that spurred enormous amounts of modernization to kind of take place over a 1 or 2 year period. I'm imagining you might have been a little bit of ahead of the curve on that one. But amidst those major modernization efforts, can you walk us through your biggest takeaways on what truly changed in agency IT environments with that?
Sure. I think that what happened is we had an ability to demonstrate, to highlight that it's not about a location any longer. It's about a capability that information technology professionals can bring to the table that can transform organizations in ways that nobody really thought about before, or they thought about it, but they didn't know quite how they're going to get there. I think that the last 2 years have afforded information technology components to really take big steps, big leaps that would have taken probably 10 years. It was collapsed into 2 years. Organizations that maybe lacked that ability to bring that good user experience to just about anywhere in the United States, and they were limited to their facilities. Well, they had to transform overnight, and so I think that that's one piece of it. I think that the other part of this is the change in engagement with the customer base was profound. It has to be profoundly different than it was in the past. More and more, information technology has got to be connected to its customer in order to satisfy those emerging requirements, to understand them and integrate them into an overall strategic plan of delivery of capabilities. I think that those are some of the pieces there that I believe are fundamentally important for us moving forward.
Absolutely. Well, we saw it as well. Like one of the customers right at the very beginning, one that wasn't necessarily as prepared and had to really kind of go from a 100% on-premise workforce to 90%. Obviously, probably can't get everyone. There are going to be those positions where somebody actually has to be on site. But what we were finding was that, and I'm sure we'll get more to this later on in the conversation, was the first thought was, especially from a performance perspective or visibility perspective, was let's throw bandwidth at the problem. Because the description we were getting from some organizations were a lot of their on-premise applications, of course, that's what drives towards SaaS, drives toward the cloud. Very shortly after that, were completely unusable. The performance was actually that off compared to what it was when people were in the office.
Sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I you made me smile as you talked about that bandwidth issue there. Just kind of as a personal aside here, an experience that I learned was we had a lot of business applications that were at the FBI. We had some at the OIG where the user experience just wasn't good, and people had tried to solve that problem over time. And oftentimes, what they were doing is they were throwing more bandwidth at trying to solve the issue with improvements in performance. They might see some incremental improvements there, or they might put their business application or service on a higher class of server, whether it was one that they did in-house or they did it in the cloud, and still it might not have delivered the kind of true performance increases that they were seeking here. And oftentimes, what I learned from looking at this kind of broadly was we weren't really looking at the user experience. We weren't understanding where the problem was. And because of that, we were turning to the tried and true, which was, okay, well, we'll give you more bandwidth and see what happens. And so what I learned is that oftentimes the organization is overinvested in bandwidth. It's overinvested in some of its compute resources, and it's masking the real problems. And that is that oftentimes we've got business application problems, or we've got database performance problems, or we've got a combination of the two that are occurring. And if we fix those issues there, we can right size what the investment looks like for our network or for our servers, and we're going to see economies in doing that. More importantly, we're going to fix that user experience that we didn't really significantly improve or change that with those changes that we made in the past. Now, the only way you get there is you've got to have a good end user performance monitoring tool that democratizes that view of what that experience looks like. And what I mean by that is that it can't be something that just the network team sees it. I want my help desk team to see it. I want my server team to see it. I want my business application and database teams to see what that performance looks like. And it gets me out of the cycle of having teams bounce a problem from one to another without really doing problem resolution. So I think that for me, having that kind of transparency in problem solving in a complex environment where maybe some users are at home, some are in the workplace, some are on travel, the ability to solve this issue by having a good end user performance monitoring tool is fundamental in today's world. We didn't talk about that up till now because everybody's been trying to, okay, I've got to get to the cloud. Well, I got to get zero trust implemented. But at the end of the day, your users need to have good performing business applications, or they're not going to be happy with you.
Absolutely, 100%. I sometimes find it, I won't say comical, but one thing that I see with a lot of organizations, where I have in the past, not as much now, to your point, and user experience and monitoring that, being able to quantify it in some way, shape, or form has become even more important. I think that we're all kind of realizing that. But in the past, especially before the pandemic, when we were working within these closed environments, private environments, teams would look at end user performance, trying to ascertain it through a different method. Whether that be, I'm looking at my network monitoring tools, and I can see things like response time for the network. I can see what the time is end to end. I can see what the response is for both the end user and the network. But that's in a completely private environment, and if you've implemented visibility correctly in that environment, you can reliably sometimes, say 75% of the time, reliably use that particular data to kind of try to ascertain what end user experience is. The comical part was the one thing that we weren't looking at, even though we were all kind of, beholden to end user experience as the measuring stick to whether or not we were doing a good job or not, was the one place we weren't really looking. It was at the actual end user. As the pandemic starts happening and we move from, a completely private environment, now we have applications in the cloud. We have applications that are SaaS. These are, not necessarily within our ability to control that environment, to the same degree. We have end users that are places where we don't necessarily have control. End user experience and monitoring that, being able to quantify it, is just significantly more important. And so that might be the answer to the next question I had for you, which was, where have you seen the biggest changes in what is expected to create that reliable enterprise IT environment, to support our agency missions?
Well, I think that some of the biggest things that we face today is this continuous change that's occurring inside of our environment. The rapid pace of software updates that occur inside of the environment, many of which you may not even have direct control in the release of those, even as a member of the enterprise services team. And what that means is that I've got an environment now that's constantly evolving. It's changing all the time. we see Microsoft zero-day releases coming into our environment at a steady pace. Oftentimes, they're minimally tested by Microsoft. I'm not picking on Microsoft here, guys, but they're kind of a classic illustration of what happens, and that is that we are pushed properly so by our cybersecurity arm within the Department of Homeland Security to get these releases out as fast as possible. And the vendors are out there and they're scared to death of a zero-day hack. And so what they're doing is they're getting these releases out as fast as they can. The pace at which we're moving today means that we're pushing things into the environment with minimal amount of real test data across a complex environment. And the result of this is that we have to have a mechanism by which to have some confidence that when we push something, we know how it affected the environment. The only way that you can know if something affected the environment is if you previously were measuring the environment. And historically, we've not done a very good job of measuring the environment, an enterprise environment, end to end. And so I think that for me, the thing that has changed the most is that we have to think in terms of it's not a static environment. And if we don't baseline what performance looks like and then measure against performance over time, we can't logically identify where a problem may exist. We can't identify if a Microsoft Service Pack release has suddenly begun to introduce anomalous things that were not occurring inside of our environment that 24 hours ago it wasn't happening. And so I think that that's an aspect that is critically important today, is having the awareness of what's happening in your environment has never become more important for an organization. Now, my apologies to you if I did kind of like a politician here and I took your question and I changed it up a little bit, but I think that for me, I've lived this experience of what it's like when we release things into our environment and we've changed it, and then we're trying to sort out complex problems that exist, and we didn't necessarily have all the test tools that are available today to help your enterprise team look at and solve a problem a lot faster and with a lot less anxiety about what the problem really is. And then the other piece of this is being able to communicate clearly what its plan of attack is and trying to solve a problem once it's been introduced into the environment. I think that by having a measurement tool in place, you can do those sorts of things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What I'll add to that is actually kind of something that you said kind of made me think of another area where this is, very much so related to end user experience. But I've also seen oftentimes, especially in the past, I call it the death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? You're trying to implement these things kind of, one, as you said, without a really good understanding of what the end user's experience is prior to making these changes. But then I think sometimes groups think of things like modeling and simulation as a difficult thing to do, or it sounds very hard to do, or hard to accomplish, and so therefore scary, when there really are the tools out there to take the information that we already have, through end user experience monitoring, so we know what that end user experience is like, and then very easily build a model, not, piece by piece and having to, program it by hand or something along like that, but take an actual model of my real environment that is built from my real environment. And then all of the other, pieces, how much application traffic for every specific user, for every specific end user, and apply that to a model that I've changed to say something. And again, not picking on Microsoft, but I think that every organization recently has made that change from, Exchange to Office 365, for example, right? But how do I model? How do I know that my move from one to the other, when it's going to be a different path? Where are my hotspots going to be? Be able to model that for every single user. It's actually not difficult. And with both the understanding of what it was before, you can get an idea of what it's going to be, afterwards, instead of just making a change. I had a customer recently come to me say that they had gotten to a point where they had moved over, say, tens of thousands, of course, employees, but they'd moved over something like 100,000 employees, and they were starting to have performance issues. And when they went back and said, let's build this model and take a look at it, they saw that that was exactly what was going to happen. And the reason that it was starting to have performance problems was nothing to do with the application, but the environment and their lack of understanding of how it was going to affect it. So I'm sorry, long-winded on that one, but your statement had brought that thought to me. So
yeah, and I can say I've seen it the other way, where you introduce an application. It looks good in your test environment. You've put it through all your proper testing. You've got it out there. Your users are starting to use it. Performance is looking good until demand on the business application begins to be applied. A good example is a time and attendance system, with a lot of employees not really entering time and attendance information until a little bit later in the pay periods. And so that's an application that is a really good example of use of it, or demand on it is low at the start of a pay period, but toward the end, it's being used to a great extent by workforce. And so if you don't model your testing around that, then you're likely to experience what we did at the FBI, which was several weeks of pain of trying to get past a new software release, which had fundamentally changed where the workload was with the application. It was a commercial software application. We simply implemented it in our environment. But what happened is that of course, the software development company changed where the performance demand was at, and they moved it from the database layer up to the application layer. And we didn't understand that. So we were really hosting this thing in the incorrect environment. The moment that we changed that to the correct environment, we fixed our performance problem. But of course, we had several weeks of real pain inside of our organization as we went through this. What would have been very, very nice to have had was a simulation tool so that we could do synthetic transactions on this thing and push it to the point where it couldn't go any further. And then we would have understood with clarity that we were hosting in the wrong environment. We would have known, don't release this thing into the environment until you really rehosted it into something different than the mainframe that it was running on. So lessons like that are painful for an organization to go through. I would say that today you don't have to live that pain, because there are solutions that are available, good solutions that can be used by your entire team to drive organizational transparency. More importantly, it's not just driving the transparency inside of your own team. It's really about sharing that information with your organization, with your customers, about this is what performance looks like in our system. It's not IT telling the story. This is the real world and how well we're doing, or where our challenges are. I think that the big attribute of this too is it does tell me when I've got a bad application design. It allows me to focus on that and fix that problem that's probably been there for a long, long time and nobody ever really got to solving it.
Yeah, absolutely. With what you just said, I have a feeling I know at least the partial answer to the next question, and I think we're going to be in violent agreement. But what are some of the biggest areas where the IT organization as a whole needs to think differently about responding to performance issues?
I think that we have to understand we have to respond as a unified team. We can't have it resting on the shoulders of our network team to try to tell the rest of the components of the organization, an enterprise IT organization, where the problem is at. And so I think that it changes the nature of how information is shared inside of there. It also allows your enterprise IT team to be able to engage in a different sort of a way with what I'm going to call shadow IT, which that probably evokes some smiles and some frowns at the same time with our audience, because the reality is you may have an enterprise organization, but you've got a shadow IT running inside your organization as well, with business applications and services that have been stood up by your individual components of your organization. And oftentimes you get held accountable for it because it's hosted inside your enterprise hosted environment, but you're not responsible directly for that business application, but you get all the blame when there's a problem. Wouldn't it be nice if you're positioned to be able to have a different kind of a conversation with your customer that is hosting that application and say, here's the real deal with your business application and the performance issues, where before they're simply able to point their finger and say, okay, well, fix this. And you don't have real clarity around what's going on with their application. With a tool like this, which is an end user monitoring tool, you have that ability to do something like that, where before you couldn't have had that conversation. You could have, but you wouldn't have been able to do it with fact-based information that you can gain today with something like user monitoring.
Absolutely. You have mentioned a couple of times now, the sharing of data, or the larger team understanding or being able to view the data. And one of the things that you said too was hinted at. All these groups are kind of measured, obviously, in different ways. If I have the security team, I have the network team, the end user team, the database network, what have you. But in the end, really, what the major measuring stick for if they're doing a good job is, the end user productivity, end user experience, their ability to do their job and such. And it's interesting that oftentimes we don't see. I'll go into an organization to their NOCs, let's just say, and there's different people working, and they have the TVs on the screens, and the network team's looking up a network problem. They're looking at network data, and they're kind of unintentionally siloing themselves within this one realm, even if that data would be useful to another part of the organization or another team within the organization, say the SOC. They're not necessarily actively collaborating and sharing that information. And oftentimes what I get is customers say, I have problems. I know I have a problem. I just don't know where it is. And that problem usually lies within the periphery or the edges between two silos, right, or domains within the organization. So I like what I'm hearing you say about fostering more of sharing. We all have the same goal. We are all measured in the end by the same measuring stick, or at least the same end goal. And so it only makes sense that we would be sharing in the data as well.
I'll say that I believe in that so profoundly that what it did is, for all of the supervisors for my entire division at the OIG, their performance measures were one and the same, and they were all user-based performance measures, and largely, and by sharing that responsibility and sharing that ownership, it forced more of a team dynamic of what I expected. The same held true even down at the working level, which was even at the working level, across different components of the IT, there were shared obligations that every person had with regard to trying to improve the user performance environment for us as an organization. And so I speak to this because culturally there are things that we can do as an IT organization to try to help ourselves instill that kind of behavior corporately with ourselves, because it's not a natural behavior. What we've been trained to do for many, many years is, okay, you're a network team, you're a server team, you're whatever you are inside of the organization. And really, we want to move away from that and view ourselves all as having a collective responsibility for trying to improve that user experience.
I'm really glad to hear that. That's one of the things that I speak about, quite often about is tear down silos and start to develop domains. You're never going to get away from domains. You need domain expertise. There can't be one vanilla skill set across the entire organization. But starting off with measuring everyone with the same measuring stick eliminates things like the desire to do mean time to innocence rather than mean time to resolution. Getting in a room. We're all going to get in a room, and we're all going to, manually correlate this data until we figure out what the problem is. War rooms and such. And I find that mentality shift that you're describing eliminates quite a bit of that with an organization. So
it really moves you out of that reactive mode. You become much more of a proactive organization, and you combine that now with a good tool that allows your team to be able to delve into where the problem is, and you're going to change the outcome for your user base in a significant way. They're going to see less outages because you're going to identify them before they actually happen. You're going to identify problems before it becomes an outage, and you're going to do a corrective action. And then when you do have a problem inside your environment, you're more likely to resolve it faster than under the old model that we always worked under.
Very much so, agreed. So talk to me about the importance of, and we've touched on this, a little bit, maybe a little bit more in depth, but touch on the importance of benchmarking product performance across an enterprise environment, and why that information may be critical. Like I said, we've touched on it, but may be critical for multiple IT teams within that are involved within the organization, and how that relates to continual product performance improvements.
Sure. Okay. Well, with everything that we seem to do in this world today, it's benchmarked in some way. You lay down in a smart bed, it tells you how you slept at night, and you go through your day using different tools that tells you how things are performing. And so it's critically important for us as an organization to really understand how our services are performing on any given day. And without a benchmark, again, we're going to go back into we're not quite sure where our problem is at with a business application problem or a database problem that may be occurring with certain database queries, but not with all database queries. And so I think that it is really important that we understand that the more clarity that we have around how our systems perform on a regular basis, and that we measure performance over time. In other words, I'm going to compare this information against how it was performing 30 days ago and 3 months ago. And with that, I've got trend data that allows me to look at and say, okay, well, maybe I've got a problem that is occurring in some of our design characteristics of our application. Maybe we've got some poor SQL queries that we've developed over time. We need to go in and clean that up. So it allows me to do that. But also, if you want to advocate for a change inside of your environment, it's best to actually have performance measurement data to go with. If you want to make an argument for changing from one type of a business application to another, or you've got a customer that wants to do that, if you can't resolve performance characteristics with a commercial application, I can't think of a better reason to go look for something different than I can look at it and tell you that it performs badly in our environment, and there's no way to resolve it because it's just a bad application design. That's going to cause you to really want to go and look for something different than what you've been doing. So I think it helps in decision making, Marlin. I think that's one piece of it.
So that actually kind of begs the question. So if an organization wants to correlate an ROI, say, for of an IT investment that focuses on improving application or network performance, workforce productivity, what have you, how, I think that's part of it, but broader picture, how would one go about measuring?
Okay. Well, the return on an investment for a business application is really measured in productivity. And so what I want an application that is performing well, that the user is not clicking the send button and then having to stand by for minutes while some transaction is occurring in the application, whether they're in the office or on the road. And so return on investment here it can be measured in workforce productivity for each one of your business applications. And so That's really the largest expense that we have inside of an organization is our workforce. And so wherever we can do performance increases for our business apps, then we're going to see a return on investment there. And we should be able to measure that. I should be able to tell you that, okay, I have improved the speed of this system. And now instead of having an analyst or an agent that's sitting there waiting for a file upload that in the past might have taken 20 minutes from some remote location, it can be done in 5. That's measurable time that you can equate that to performance of your workforce. And I think that sometimes we in IT, we kind of miss the point here. We talk about our technologies, but where we are able to demonstrate that we can improve performance for our organization through workforce productivity, that's a powerful statement. It really equates to organizational leadership, being willing to invest in tools and technologies that allows us to do things like that.
Absolutely. I can remember back when I was an SEO so many years ago. I'm going to age myself here. I can remember I had built an ROI for an organization, and one of the things that I added in there was productivity. And you're absolutely correct. I mean, the more productive that we can be, the better. But from an ROI, without being able to do something like monitor end user performance and therefore their productivity, it's very difficult to utilize that as a solid ROI. It's always kind of called a soft, ROI. I could remember, I think at one point in time, I said, I was going to save everyone a minute a day, but only 1 out of 4 people was actually going to take advantage of that 1 minute a day. So 3 other people would waste it, I don't know, at the water cooler, what have you. Because it was soft, it was very difficult to utilize that, even though it is what we're all looking to achieve, very difficult to utilize that in ROI. By doing this, would you agree that correlating that productivity ROI is now no longer, the matter of being a soft ROI item? It can actually be considered a very hard and firm, this is the productivity gains that this organization is getting from these people on this application.
Yeah, I think that it becomes very easy to be able to demonstrate that. And what it does, the most important piece of this at the same time is it transforms that relationship with you, with your IT and your customer base, because they feel it, they sense the improvement, and it's appreciated. And oftentimes, what happens is IT only hears the negative news, but when you can begin to put capabilities in place that can change performance of a business application and improve the workday for your average employee inside the organization. It's a measure of productivity, but it's also a measure of workforce satisfaction that comes into play. And let's be honest about this. If you're in IT, there's a lot of days you're not being thanked for what you do. And if I used to know a DoD IT leader, and he used to say, if you're in the business of looking for thank yous in IT, you need to pick a new career field. But I think that what has changed since he's made those sorts of statements was we do have the ability to change the environment for our employees and make it to where they can be satisfied with delivery of good services by IT, because we can measure what that performance looks like, and we can change it because we can measure it. We can improve services that would have otherwise been hidden from us.
Right. And when we make changes, we can immediately know whether or not that change was, a positive or a negative to, the end user experience and their ability to be productive and such. Go ahead.
I was going to say this. You're probably sensing from me that my view of the relationship between IT and the customer is one where it's hand in glove. And I think that this is always an essential element of the success of any IT organization is direct customer engagement, continuous feedback loop, accepting of criticism, whether fair or unfair, and then being able to action where we can do things that will logically improve performance over time. inside of the system. Some steps can be big steps, some are going to be small, but the objective here, by continuing to focus on that end user experience and improve the quality of our business applications and services that end user is experiencing, we're going to change the dynamics of the relationship between IT and the customer base in a meaningful way.
Yeah. So with that, how should CIOs and IT teams think about the gaps in their capabilities, applications, and/or systems, and how does one go about thinking about where to invest?
Sure. Well, I think that for many of us that were in the CIO seat, what we were looking to do was to, in many instances, get ourselves moved to the cloud because it offered agility. We wanted to do things like try to implement zero trust and do things like that. And today, I think that the investments are more around tools that give us clarity about what's happening inside of our environment to try to improve that experience. But what we need, of course, is to be ready for this time of year, especially for the calls that do happen inside of organizations when your CIO is called and told, okay, we've got $5 million, and do you have a business plan that can address your most critical need at this point? If I give you that $5 million, can you execute? And oftentimes, IT organizations are caught a little bit flat-footed when those calls happen, although it shouldn't occur because it happens every year. But if you are ready, you already know what that investment is going to look like, and you've already socialized with the leadership team around what it is that you want to invest in to try to improve the customer experience, then you're going to go far in getting the funding resources that might come toward the end of the financial year as we're approaching right now. So my counsel would be that regardless of your position inside of an IT organization, it's incumbent upon you to identify those critical needs that you have right now and to develop for yourself and for your organization a sound business case. It doesn't have to be big or complicated. It just needs to communicate what that need is. So when your leadership team is asked about what can it execute on right now, try to improve the business environment, you've got a plan in place.
Right. I've heard of it. Have the story ready. Right. You just know what the problem is, and you can describe it well. You can describe what the solution is, why that is the solution, and then more importantly, what is the effect of not doing, X, Y, or Z. It's a important skill, and it's also important when talking to leadership.
I would say that it doesn't happen by happenstance either. There is some strategic planning that goes into this effort, some strategic thought that goes into it, and really a dialogue between the employees inside of an enterprise organization and their leadership team around what is fundamentally needed here in order to transform that business environment, how to improve that customer experience.
Absolutely. So with that, I think that we are getting close to question time here. So Brian, I'd like to invite you to come back on and start us off with some of the questions that are in the Q&A.
Sure thing, Marlin. Thank you again, both to Don and yourself. So we do actually have some questions coming in. They're looking pretty great. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the first one. So we keep speaking about identifying and resolving issues by implementing changes, but how quickly can these changes be actually manifested?
I think that the changes, I touched on this, and our environment is never static any longer for an enterprise IT organization. We have releases that are occurring continuously inside of them. That's a reality. And that's only going to increase over time. And so that's here to stay. And so really at this point, Brian, I think that the answer on it is be ready for this new world order in that regard, by arming yourself with a capability that allows you to keep up with that by understanding what's going on inside of your environment.
Absolutely. The way I'm going to answer this maybe slightly differently, just rereading it to make sure I understand here. So we can keep speaking about identifying and resolving issues by implementing changes. How quickly can these changes be manifested? So I think what I would add to that, Donald, is one of the things that we in IT have kind of all, I think, thought at one point in time, and probably still do, is that oftentimes, especially with our very large agency networks, these massive environments, is they're not necessarily the most flexible and agile thing. And they're not flexible because, little tiny changes, can cause unforeseen problems. We've got plenty of probably very smart people on this call, and we can probably think of every failure scenario possible that could happen during a change or what have you. But they're still pretty fragile. But what we're trying to move toward by implementing these different changes is, one, to continually provide excellent end user experience for our end users. But then also these changes should be moving us in a direction of creating a more agile and flexible environment. So what I would say is identifying and resolving issues by implementing changes. Those changes, and how quickly it can manifest. What we would hope is that if we're doing things in the right way, each one of these changes that we're talking about is going to continually allow us to move even quicker and manifest changes, or the right changes, even quicker as we move into the future.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Second question here for both of you. Are there any specific challenges when it comes to measuring end user experiences? If my end users will be shifting between the office or their branch office and then from working remotely in their home?
The short answer on this is that a good end user performance tool is going to work regardless of your location, whether you're in a facility connected directly to your network, you're working from home, or you're on the road somewhere. It should be something that allows me to measure performance regardless of where you're at.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I'll say that it shouldn't, right? It should be able to do both. If you're using the right tool, should be able to do both. What is needed in that particular instance is something that understands, one, that end user is now in two different places, or that device is in two different places, and being able to apply, the correct set of analytics to it to understand. I've always said this. Was talking to a DoD customer. Email in Afghanistan is going to have a very distinctly different performance, set of performance characteristics than, say, if I'm sitting on a base in Texas, right? So, and the system has to understand that those are two different environments and be able to provide feedback to that end user experience based on the environment that person is in. With that said, we should be trying to make the end user experience in any one of those environments better, again, with the changes from the last question as time moves on.
Yeah, Marlin, I would agree with you. A example that comes to mind is that within the FBI, we had about 65 different locations around the world, Legat program, and there were unique challenges with bandwidth connectivity to a lot of those Legat locations around the world. And in specific instances like that, your performance measurements are going to look different. You need to account for that and recognize that there are situations where it is going to be a different type of an environment, and you need to be able to measure against that specific environment.
Absolutely, it wouldn't be a good thing for an end user monitoring solution to say, look, Tom's email is doing great right now, and then he goes, I don't know, on a trip, and he's at a hotel, and now it's less. And what am I going to do? Generate an alert to that? We would be inundating our IT teams with a bunch of useless, data and alerts that don't need to be there. It needs to be able to understand those are two different places and what good looks like in each one of those.
Yeah, but the one truth that holds true in this is that it should be a tool that will work regardless of location.
Absolutely. Yes, agreed.
So next question that I've got here, can I build dashboards to constantly evaluate and quantify my end user improvements? And is this something that should be shared amongst other line of business teams, or how do I build advocates to cross leverage this data?
There's a couple of questions in there. Do you want to take first shot, Donald?
Yeah. Okay. I will definitely take first crack at this one. One of the biggest things that I always thought was to actually have a good set of KPIs that I could illustrate what performance looked like for our business services, regardless of where it was located at. And a dashboard view of what a system performance looks like is very, very valuable for the IT team, but it's very valuable in terms of informing leadership inside of an organization what performance looks like. I can't stress enough that many of our challenges that we have with our customers is that lack of transparency. And when we are able to break down the barriers that separate us by being transparent with the information that we are getting as an IT workforce through dashboards that are understandable, we're only going to improve our ability to get the kind of investments that we need to continuously improve IT. That's my take of it.
Yeah, I would agree as well. I'll take maybe a little bit more of the second piece, but I'll bring in something that you had talked about earlier, Donald, which was you can sometimes look like a sunk cost or a necessary evil. To your point earlier, where it was saying where you said the good things that are done aren't necessarily spoken about or shared with the rest of the organization. I feel that if we're looking, because we've talked about some cultural changes here in both thought process and mentality, I think this all goes in that particular direction. We can bring ITG teams to being collaborative teams as opposed to siloed teams, collaborative domains instead of silos. But that cultural change also needs, very positive backing. So, just letting the rest of the other lines of business know that it is understood that there is a problem. This is what we're doing to work on it. These are the improvements that we've made. But then also historically to be to say, here are all the improvements that our investment in IT have made to end user experience, to your constituents, to your end users, and sharing that throughout the organization, I think is very important.
Yeah, it builds relationships.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question, and then we will go ahead and close out. I've been advocating for examining this type of data for several years. Can you go into greater detail about what I can do as a network administrator to convince my leadership that this is an important investment?
Sure. I think that the best way to describe an investment like this is in terms of how we're going to transform the user experience inside of the organization. We transformed ourselves by moving to the cloud. We've done things to improve security around our data, and it is really time for us to focus on how to make the user experience inside of our government systems as good as what you might have if you're sitting there and you're connecting to your bank through your local network or to something else. You want to be able to highlight where you're at and what the challenges are in the system so that the organizational leadership is going to know what resources that you need. You're going to be able to communicate it. They're going to be able to see it with clarity around where we can take steps to improve services inside of the organization. Today, keeping our customers satisfied is a critical element, in my opinion. It's something that if we don't do that, then they're going to look for solutions outside of either the enterprise organization that you're part of or the team that you're a part of. That's a reality, and we shouldn't be surprised by that today.
And in the interest of time, because we are here 1 minute left, what I'll say just to add to that is as a former network engineer at one point in time, I said what packets don't lie, right? If you're a network person, you've probably heard that before, and that's very true. But the measuring stick that we're all measured on is end user experience, regardless of what portion of the IT organization or at least it should be. And end user experience doesn't lie.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like more information on how Carahsoft or Riverbed Technology can assist your federal agency, please visit www.carahsoft.com or email us at riverbedmarketing@carahsoft.com. Thanks again for listening and have a great day.